This evening, I am pleased to welcome my colleague Ken Kilbride from ADHD Ireland and Valerie Andrews from UCD. We are supporting the session this evening, and a very warm welcome to Charlotte Valère, who is our speaker this evening and is also a close collaborator and partner of Oz and Ken's with the work we do here on neurodiversity. So I'm just going to give Charlotte a quick introduction, and then I will hand over to Charlotte. So Charlotte is an investment banker and a seasoned FTSE chair, non-executive director and governance expert with a wealth of board experience across different sectors. She's a professor, author and public speaker in corporate governance, leadership, equality and diversity. She's a lifelong human rights advocate, and she's driven to play her part in creating an inclusive society. She advocates for equality and inclusion for all, working in the intersection of government, industry, academia, and the third sector. She founded Board Apprenticed and the Global Institute of Neurodiversity, ION. So you're very welcome, Charlotte. Thanks a million. It's great to have you here. I'm going to take down my screen now, and you can pop up your presentation.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, and thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to have an opportunity to share some of my own experience, to share some of the things we are hearing from around the world of what we can do as leaders, and especially to talk about disclosure, because that is a really big thing for most of us. I'm autistic and have ADHD. I'm late diagnosed only 8 years ago. And sort of working my way around what that means when you have lived a whole life unaware of that, but seeing all the patterns and all the things that came with that. I went very public in the UK in 2020 with being autistic after some collaboration with some autism charities that would like to do a campaign, and it was slightly overwhelming being on Sky News and across the national papers and beyond. And with that came many other new minority people contacting me to say, actually, I am as well. Also directors I've known for years who's never disclosed to me. So that led us to come together a group of new minority individuals to launch an institute that's aiming to bring 1 million people together, us and our allies around the world, so that we feel more comfortable, especially around disclosure and being who we are. So today, what I'm going to talk about is neurodiversity leadership disclosure, understanding neurodiversity. I'm not going to spend much time on that because I think most of you are probably well aware of that. Neuro-minority leadership, we've shifted the language a little bit at the Institute of Neurodiversity because we had a lot of neuro-minority people not liking to be called neurodivergent. So we thought there's also languages around the world where that word doesn't exist. So we thought minority and majority is something that exists everywhere. And really the movement we are doing is a minority movement for us all to be able to proffer equally to everybody else. So we're going to talk about disclosure, some benefits of disclosure, challenges, some light guidelines, the role of leadership, and then, a slide around corporate culture changes, because that's some of the things that's really needed, and we have to try to lead on that so that we can all come along with this. So understanding neurodiversity, so really all the different kinds of fruits and vegetables is the same as in the human species. We have all different kinds. And people often talk about neuro-minority as, oh, you're on a spectrum. But actually, we're all on a spectrum of different things in all of humanity. And we like people to see this in a much broader way. I think about 200 years ago, there was a real focus on creating this normative human bell curve, where there was lots of measurements of head sizes, of all kinds of things around the world to find out what is a typical human being. And that seemed to continue. And it's like, if you're not within the middle of the bell curve, then actually you're not right. Something is wrong, and you need to be fixed. You need to learn how to be in the middle, and the outliers, as I've been called on a few occasions, really have to focus on sorting themselves out so that they get into this middle and behave so that the broader group of people are happy to be around us. So we feel that actually we should try to look at it differently and try to broaden our acceptance of differences in humans, and accept that we have different neurotypes just as well as we have different colors of eyes, and we have different ways of socializing within different neurotypes just as well as we have, for example, between different cultures. So we understand the differences between cultures and social behavior, but we don't really understand it too well between neurotypes, and we have been a bit obsessed with saying there's the right way and then there's all the wrong ways, and we need to fix the wrong ways. So what we like to see is that there's a much broader band of what is the right way, simply as human beings. And just very few sort of traits and abilities that we that isn't going into any depth at all. But the neuromajority traits often include, for example, small talk, which a lot of neurominorities find difficult. There's a lot of this is how we always did it, and their sensory band tend to be narrower compared to neurominorities, where we tend to have different kind of focus. It could be hyper focus, it could be just focus on special interest, but it's different to this normative way. We often see patterns as different thinking. And also something that we hear again and again from the neurominority people we talk to around the world is that it's not so easy for us to conform to the neuromajority set of rules. And we naturally question, like, okay, this might be how we've always done it, but we can also do it like this and this and this and this. And that's certainly what I see happens quite automatically, certainly in my own head and in those people I know that are from neurominorities. It's very difficult not to keep looking at different ways of doing things and see those alternative ways, maybe see them with 3D. And we have these broader sensory bands. So, for example, as a leader, I would say that if you have a broader sensory band, it can be helpful when you feel people more. It can also be overwhelming potentially, but if you learn to manage around it, I think you will learn better how other people function in a broader context and be broadly more inclusive. So neurominority leadership, from sort of my perspective. So we have the neurodiversity inclusive leaders of all neurotypes, and they generally display these kind of traits. They're kind of respectful, active listeners, clear and direct language. They'll be using different kind of media to ensure everybody can follow, ask for communication preferences, respect sensory needs, flexible, avoid making assumptions. All of that neurominority leaders have as well. But in addition to that, we have the experiencing the world differently within ourselves and understand that other people can as well, because this is the world we live in ourselves every day. We are aware that we communicate in a different manner, and we're trying to work around that, but we're also aware that everybody communicates in different manners and that is okay. Working with different solutions and not sticking to what we have always done is also something that a neurominority leader will tend to be open to, because that's how we do things ourselves often. And again, because we have the broader sensory needs, we understand other people's sensory needs better. When you live it, obviously, that's the better way of doing that. And then we understand this feeling of being different, which a lot of people have. And if you are a neurominority leader, that is a big strength, that you can support the people that work with you and for you through that understanding. So disclosure is quite a big thing, however, for most neurominority leaders. And it's something we talk about in different groups around the world. We've had it up as a subject several times because it is continuously something that we struggle with. So we have these 6 icons who all have gone public with being from neurominority, and who credits their neurominority to the success of being a successful business person. So you have Richard Branson, Virgin, I'm sure you all know him. He's got dyslexia. He's doing a lot of work with dyslexia. Ingmar Kamprad, who started IKEA, ADHD and dyslexia, but has built a huge company around the world. Charles Schwab, corporate finance person. David Niemann, ADHD. Barbara Cochran, dyslexia, and then Elon Musk, of course, who's autistic. So whether we, agree with who or what they are or not, I think we can say that they have all been successful, and they chose to disclose, and that helps all of us. But it is a very personal choice. For me, when I was pushed to disclose, I was not comfortable doing that. I was concerned with doing that. I wanted to make sure if I did do that, it would have impact, because potentially I would lose my own income and not be able to work within boardrooms, which is where I work the most. I was concerned that people would look at me and all they could think about was me being autistic with all kind of biases that they carry because of how the narrative has been written. So I think it's really important that it's something that we think about closely before we do it. We shouldn't allow other people to sort of push us into it. As it happened, it was okay, and the things I feared has not happened. Everything has gone on as if nothing happens, and now I can openly say, "Oh, by the way, I'm autistic and ADHD." And what I find is so many people go, "Oh, so am I." And so actually, when we open that conversation, we find out just how many of us are hidden, but are nevertheless still there, especially at leadership level. And I would love to see more of those leaders speak up and actually talk about their own experiences and how it's okay to do so, and what risks there might be. So I'm going to just go through some of the things, so benefits that I see. The potential advantages, obviously, to your organization. You're able to bring your full self to the table, to be authentically you. For me, I think that has certainly helped me in the boardrooms I work in. So I serve on a handful of boards, and they know, I would say it's kind of difficult for them to not know that. So everybody knows it, and it's taken into account when we discuss things, because it seems that often I can see things that the other board members are not seeing yet. Of course, on the basis of experience, but I think also on the basis of seeing different connections. So some boards are saying, "Oh, you look around the corners." I don't think I look around corners, right? But I do think that there are some strengths that need to be acknowledged around being a different neurotype. I obviously have to look after myself and ensure that my needs are met and I don't get overwhelmed by people around me or by the environment around me. But being able to be myself and talk about being from neurominority is a huge help for me. Because otherwise it's like I have to keep things quiet and not talk about it, and that for me kind of feels like lying almost. It's just difficult to, and I generally can't really lie. I don't know. I forget. I can't remember what actually happened. So innovation is another thing that is a benefit. In the right kind of organization, we would all be able to bring our maybe slightly right-wing or left-wing ideas to the table, and people will actually listen to them. So innovation could be increased by more leaders being open, because then other people in the organization will do the same. Diverse voices really needs to be heard and needs to be respected. And if leaders are not leading in that way, then it's very difficult for people below. I sometimes speak to organizations and said, how can we start sorting out diversity from the bottom up? And I just said it doesn't work as well from the bottom up. If they're going to meet a glass ceiling for advancement, we have to start by having some executive buy-in, and ideally some of the leaders in the company actually speaking out about their own neurominorities or their experiences, whatever it is. We have heard from organizations that once they open up the neurodiversity employee resource group, it does seem, and there's more inclusion in that space, it seems that everyone becomes sort of happier and more productive. When you're able to say, sometimes people feel that I'm too direct, or there's things I say in ways, sometimes I can say what's because I'm from Denmark and people go, okay, but actually also too direct in Denmark. And I don't really think about it, it's just the way it comes out. But now when people know that I am autistic and ADHD, it's like, they go, okay, but that's because of that. So we're moving more closer to these cultural differences and the neurodivergent differences being heard and respected for what they are. But for that, we do need as leaders to speak out. I did kind of think that nobody, would expect me to be from a neurominority. But what's interesting is that so many people say, well, I always thought you were a bit different. And actually, we can try to mask and be something else. But there's some kind of deep level way people feel us and we feel other people. Maybe that's why I got bullied incessantly as a child throughout school and school bus by people I didn't even know. I'd like to have bulimia on my forehead. It was very difficult for me to understand. I think it was because the other children could simply feel that I'm different, even though I pretty much didn't speak until I was about 12. But so we can't really hide. And I think the more we talk about these things and open it up, hopefully we will feel less of a need to hide because we understand our own strengths. We understand as well where we have challenges that we need to support with, and we understand what kind of support can help. I also think that leaders need to lead through vulnerabilities. I think in this day and age, certainly the younger generations are expecting leaders to lead through vulnerabilities. And if we can't do that, we certainly cannot expect our workforce to disclose anything to us if we can't lead by disclosing ourselves. And this overall feeling of inclusion for all is definitely a good result of that. So when I went very public with it, I had told all the boards I was serving on in advance that I was going to be quite public with this. And it was something that had happened years back. And obviously I have been autistic all my life. And they were all fine. Nobody asked me to leave. So that was a good result. But I seriously considered whether that could be a result of it. And that's very concerning and very uncomfortable. So that's something that we have to sit through and consider, is this important enough for us? And I guess for me, because I've always been working within equality, human rights, I knew at some stage I would have to go out and be more of an advocate, but I really had to be ready. And for anyone thinking of disclosing, I think we have to be ready to do so and shouldn't be, being pushed into it. Challenges, of course. I mean, I thought potential concerns I had with stigmas, discrimination, microaggressions, all kind of things. So what I was doing that helped me sort of overcome some of the challenges was I had a plan. I had a plan of what if with different scenarios in. So if everything went completely pear-shaped and I lost all my income, what would I do? I had a plan of some kind, right? It helped me later on when I did open up, to understand that we are many. So I came from a place of feeling lonely, and actually that's not it. We are actually many when we come together, like in organizations also like ADHD Ireland and other neurodiversity charities are bringing us together. It's quite powerful to know and understand we're many, which is why we like everybody to come together. As 1 million people, we have 16,000 people now in the Institute of Neurodiversity from around the world, and we're setting up in 21 different countries, simply to bring us together as community, and through many people also be able to advocate for change and support those in our community that are the most vulnerable, which are those of us who has additional disabilities, who are seriously struggling with mental disabilities, physical disabilities, and not getting the right support and the right treatment, because often you get a level of diagnostics override, if you want, where if I say I'm autistic, then almost anything I do will be, oh, that must be because you're autistic. Actually, no, that's not it. And I think we need to acknowledge that there are additional conditions that possibly about 20% of us have, but 80% of us might not have that, but we still have challenges in certain situations, and we are still being set up as different by society, and the way we interact with people is often not looked upon in the way it should be, in an inclusive way. So we are very concerned, especially with those of us who have extra additional disabilities. We had a situation in the UK a couple of years ago with a young autistic man who had kidney failures, and he really struggled with the dialysis. And in the end, doctors decided that they would give him palliative care because they couldn't be asked to struggle with him every time he needed dialysis. This, for me, is like, surely that's against human rights. But who speaks up for us when this happens? And then in addition to that, it was saying in the papers that the doctor said, well, because he's autistic, he wouldn't be on the waiting list for donation, for what's called like new kidney donations. And I thought, again, I was just staggered that in this day and age, we're talking about us in that way, and we're having these and that's one of the challenges that we need to overcome, but only through coming together can we actually do that. Reaching out to the neurodiversity community is certainly a help before you consider disclosing. Speak to other people I happen to know. So we have minorities in the family. I've had a few friends, and there's funny that actually most of my friends seem to be from minorities once I started looking into it. And so reaching out to people who understands what you're going through is very, very helpful. And also helping other people understand who you are, who I am, was something, because suddenly I was like, okay, maybe there's a reason I would rather be in the library than at a party since I was very young. It's a roller coaster, but we have to try to enjoy it. And that sounds really not like a good idea, but we have to try to embrace it and say, okay, this is who I am. Let me look into how that has affected me throughout my life. And let me look into my strategies going forward for how I'm going to look after myself better and move into a repurposed life that is better than when you didn't know and when you hadn't disclosed. That was my sort of plan, to repurpose how I lived and ensure that I was looking after myself well enough. No shame is a key one, and it's one that does come up again and again, that people feel shameful, and that's because of how we're being treated throughout our education, which is significantly difficult, and we are working hard to try to change that so that we are included. Again, we're not just doing the middle, the normative bell curve. We're actually broadening the way we teach so that everybody can be part of. In all our different ways of learning, they didn't seem to understand my intellect at all, and I was put in a separate class with a chap in the class who was dyslexic, and we were taught by one teacher. This was from when I was 7. So then the rest of my peers decided that we were the two dumb ones, and the teacher seemed to decide the same. So that basically followed me for 9 years of school. And it took me a while to actually realize that maybe I wasn't as dumb as they had led me to believe. But you can see what happens when you want to grow up, you want to be a leader, but actually you start from a down point where people have already decided that you can't learn anything. In fact, I taught myself everything, pretty much everything. I read Winston Churchill's biography when I was 12, but nobody knew what I was reading at home and what I was reading when I was spending incessant time in the library. So we're all different, super different. We all do this journey differently, but finding support, knowing there is a community, being part of it, speak to others, it's certainly something that can all help us. So some sort of guidelines around disclosure, and I sort of wanted to put some questions to consider before disclosing. Does the law protect me? This is different from country to country. I have used the UK as an example because I know the law here, UK Equality Act 2010, protects any one of us who are from neuro minorities. There is of course a difficulty if are you diagnosed or you're not diagnosed. We'd like to go to a place where people can self-diagnose and say, these are the challenges I have. And it doesn't have to be a medical diagnosis, but there's a verification of some kind. Ask yourself, am I at risk of direct discrimination? What would that look like? Maybe write, down some answers to that question, and where do you see them, just so that you're prepared for what can happen. Talk to other people of it. Am I at risk of indirect and micro discrimination and aggressions? Again, think about it. Where could it come from? Have you already experienced it? And maybe it won't change. Maybe it will become better because people suddenly understand you better. Will disclosing actually help me in the recruitment process when I'm looking for other jobs? Or will it help me in my job that I'm in now and have been in for a while? So I had been in jobs for 5, 6, 7 years, and that concerned me that maybe they would get rid of me, might just rotate me off the board. And actually, that's what pays my bills and my children's education. So it was a concern. We won't really know until we go there. Unfortunately, there are a lot of us that struggle within the workplace. There are various tribunals going through in different countries where we talk back and we try to push for change and push for that equality that we wish to have. And that's a long journey, but if we don't do it, we certainly won't move the dial. So we do have to go in and do these kind of things. Is the employer minority friendly? How can you see that? Do they have an employee resource group? Do they have a list of accommodations they can offer anyone they interview with? do they actually understand my neurotype? And who is it we're looking to see from understands it? Again, the leadership team should be out there saying, we're having the training, we're understanding how it works. And you should be able to see disclosures of those kinds. Of course, sometimes there is diversity washing, just like greenwashing, and it can sometimes be words with no actions behind it. When is the right time to disclose? When is it ever the right time? It's very hard to say. You have to individually figure out when is the right time. How people have disclosed and talked to us about how disclosed has varied massively. Mostly everyone has come out okay with it, which is nice to hear and to understand from the conversations we've had. We want us to make sure we can have more sort of research and access to things so we can talk about our neurotype in a way that actually people understand, because sometimes it's like we're speaking such different languages. So how do we speak across different neurotypes? Good leaders should know that and should encourage that, but it all starts with respect and kindness for whoever is in front of you. Some legal aspects, that's worth having a look at. So just using UK as a case study, we've got the Equality Act. How do we define disability is something that we need to look into in the different countries we're in. What is reasonable adjustments? What is discrimination, harassment, and victimization? What's it look like? What is it? When can we do something? When can we lift it and say, actually, this is now outside of the law? If you haven't disclosed, would an employer know, or would they reasonably have? Should they have known and therefore taken into account that some accommodation would be in place, even if we haven't disclosed? Again, it's a little bit like being pregnant as well. So that's a protected characteristic. And if you get fired when you're pregnant, that's an issue because you're protected under this law. So the social model of disability is something that we have to take into this discussion. So the core part of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the UK has been a signatory to, so we can go beyond the laws that we have in our different countries, and you can check if in your country the United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities has been signed up to. Post minorities will come under that as well. So I put a link to a paper which is Thinking Differently in Work, which is a union guide. There's a group of unions trying to come together to help us be protected in the workplace as well and supported. And this paper is quite useful, where I have taken some of these pieces from. What is the role of leadership? What is it? How do we lead as neurominority leaders? I do think it's the responsibility of all leaders, whether they're neurominority, neuromajority, whatever, to foster an inclusive culture. But first, I think you need to understand where your own leadership level is. And I always look at it as 3 different leadership levels. When we're born, we come out, we lead ourselves through communicating with the society and the world around us of what our needs are, by crying, by doing whatever. And we lead ourselves throughout our lives, for good or for bad. We can choose for other people to lead us and stop leading ourselves. That's a choice we make still. But generally, we lead ourselves throughout our lives. Then the next level is that we lead and work with a team, within a team. And we all work together for the team to be successful. And then the third level is where, as a leader, you create the environment to make other people successful. It's not about your success anymore. And in that, when you are in that level and operate at that level, it should be easier to disclose, because you have created this environment around you of people who are successful, who appreciate all the support and the creation of the right environment that you as a leader have done. I think today, leading through vulnerability is an important aspect of leadership. And then creating this culture of respect and kindness, because you can't really go wrong with respect and kindness unless you really want to go wrong. I looked a little bit at this corporate culture changes using the neurodiversity movement, because what we really need as leaders is to push for changes to the corporate culture. I'm very happy for this deck to be shared with everybody after, so I don't want to read out everything there is here. But when you use a movement to change culture, this is something we have seen over hundreds of years, from the LGBTQ plus movement to Black movement in America and in South Africa and different places of the world. We can use a movement to change culture. And I think the neurodiversity movement is like this sort of last frontier of diversity movements, where we go across absolutely everything. We exist absolutely everywhere. And we can build on that. We can build on the group of really strong people that started at the end of the last century, in the 90s, to talk a lot about actually something seems to be wrong here. We seem to be able to look at it, or we should look at it in a different way. And they were passionately advocating. And from there, it has grown into where we are today, where it's slowly but surely becoming something many people know about, and businesses look at and would like to have part of. So how do you lead this cultural change as a leader? And I think the influence that leaders have can start in motion so that they help all of us move this movement on. If you're passionate about what to do as a leader, you can make other people feel passionate too, and create this desire to create change, which I think is really important. And all of this, of course, is a bit of an X on top of disclosure, but it's more, what is the leadership that maybe will help not only you in your disclosure of being from a new minority, but also your children, your grandchildren, futures. I know that I'm not the last new minority person in my family, nor my children. There will be others coming behind, and I like to see them live in a world where they're not disadvantaged from thinking and being different. So this desire to create change, I think, is something we need to push out, and then you push into the company culture and appreciate the different successes and actually lift up the differences. Ideally, we start this in schools so that very early on, children start school and understand that differences is a strength. It's not a weakness. Conclusion here for our new minority leaders: lead with integrity and passion, lead through personal vulnerability, blaze a trail, any trail, small or big, it doesn't matter. Be a role model to all, also these future generations. And how? Well, actions will always speak louder than words. Words help, but if there's no action behind it, it's not going so far. Active advocacy for the whole neurodiversity principle, and speak up when you see anyone be discriminated against, or if you're discriminated against yourself. A good example here is Admiral Nick Hine, who disclosed 2 years ago that he was autistic, and in the army in the UK, they would not hire autistic people. That was like not on. If you're autistic, you can't get hired. And he was like, well, I've been here for 30 years, leading nuclear submarines extremely well, reaching the highest rank within the military. So he then pushed for changes to the way they hire in the military, so that today, if you're autistic, you can also get hired in the military. That is very clear change and push for change, because it was kind of difficult for the military to say, no, we don't want them. And they've had, when he's there, well, I was there. And you're saying that was not a good thing. So that's the kind of advocacy that we can do, and that we would like to see people do. But until we've disclosed, it's more difficult, but it's not impossible, because obviously we like to work with also our allies that are not from new minorities. And this is Iron. I have to just put that quickly. Sorry, that's our website if you want to join some of it. And we're now going over to Q&A.
Thanks very much. That's very comprehensive and a great overview of what is required within the area. So if anybody does have any questions or comments for Charlotte, there is a couple there already. Could you please pop them into the Q&A? And just we start off there. There was an interesting one from an anonymous attendee. I wonder at what point of vulnerability in their careers neurodivergent successful people in the examples given, i.e. Richard Branson, were at the time of their public disclosure. And if I could sort of maybe overinterpret the question, people like Richard Branson had a couple of million in the billions in the bank, owned the company, fine for him, not so good for the rest of us.
Yeah, and of course you can look at that and say, well, actually, they were already successful. I think for me, what's important is that they attribute their success to being from neuro minority, and I think that's what for me is important. And say, I'm clear that I have been successful because I have some strengths that I am using to the full. And yes, of course, many people feel that, but we're not in that situation. I was not in that situation. I was, single mom from a working class background, growing up in social housing in Denmark. With my father was a butcher, and my mother died when I was 7. So, I mean, it was tricky, right? But that doesn't have to mean that we can't be leaders in all our different ways and how we lead ourselves. And I think that's what we should remember, is that everything counts, every little thing counts. I think I'm lifting some of these people just because we need to understand that we can be successful and from a neurodiversity. And I think that's really important to bear in mind and not be discouraged by the world that is difficult, because there are ways around it. But it is easier when we stand together and when we try to get the world to change so that it's easier for us to fit in. And that's what I like to see people do. And I think these people do help the thinking move on a bit so that we can all be accepted as leaders with neurominorities.
I just want to maybe bring you back to, I think it was your second or third last slide. And you were talking about, what there is required. You talked about culture. Personally, I'm an advocate of Philip Drucker, if anybody would care to look him up. And his famous saying is, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yes.
I firmly believe that. Just to rephrase that maybe for the discussion we're having here, because you see it in lots of companies, they will have their EDI policies and they'll have all this and that. Or culture eats policy for breakfast in terms of, leading that change.
I personally think so. Culture within corporate governance is something I spend a lot of time on because it's so vital. And also within neurodiversity, because actually what we are trying to do is change culture of the world, which sounds crazy, right? But I actually think we can do it when we come together and show who we are and lift our voices together. I think then culture, when we can make that shift into culture, I think it will have rings in the water that we don't even know what they are yet. Good rings in the water that we don't even know. So if we focus on changing the culture, both in businesses, in schools, in society in general, with government, I think that's where we need to push the hardest, because we need that broader acceptance of where we are seeing people within just being human beings, as opposed to these are normal and these are not normal. We really want to get away from that, because we are all human beings. If you think about it, like 100 years ago, we would look at ethnically diverse people in a very different way, and we had all kind of ideas about, people from Africa, what was this, and people from here, there, and everywhere. And we've grown from that. Our cognitive maturity has grown from that. And I'm hoping that we can get cognitive maturity to grow more to the next level of understanding that differences are really, really important. And not agreeing with everything is actually really, really important, because it helps to make better decisions. I think if we agreed with everything, would we ever have realized that the Earth is not flat? I mean, you gotta have someone who said, I don't think so. And I think someone got thrown into jail for saying that, because that was like so crazy that the world couldn't even adopt it. But actually, culture is what we need to change, and we push into that. But with that, we have to have a high level of cognitive maturity that we operate at. And it is going in the right direction, because the younger people seem to come in at a higher cognitive maturity level, actually, where they see the world as a whole, and they see all of us, and they don't see all these little boxes that my generation and older seem to have created over the years. We need to smash those.
Indeed, and talking about things are changing, I agree with you, things are changing, but I don't think we're fully there yet. There's a question just came in from Ali. What about when you've continually been told, don't tell anyone? Or not that everyone needs to know?
I know it's a difficult one, and I spoke to a person from the US who called me to talk about they had something they termed reconstruction therapy. That was a word. I don't know what specifically it is, but it was. He said basically nobody knows I'm autistic, and my family believes that I'm not autistic, and they were at the end of their 20s and were like then whispering to me, I'm clearly still autistic. And I was like, yeah, that's never going to change no matter how much therapy. But they said, I can't tell my family that, because they believe I'm not anymore. And this is a significant issue when you can't even come to your own family. And they said, I'm stuck at home. I keep losing my jobs. I get a job. I lose it again. I get it because I can't ask for accommodation because I've been told not to tell anyone. And because of this therapy, whatever it was, it's almost like their own ability to make decisions for themselves has been taken away. And therefore they're sitting in this in this problem. So we offered them to speak to someone that we would cover the cost of to help, because I was very worried about the mental health of this young person who couldn't. So it's very hard. It's not everyone else's job to tell you what to do. We need to do what we need to do when we feel we need to do it. And can there be something backfiring? Yes, there can. When we are who we are, just like LGBTQ plus are experiencing when they come out, it's the same. When you have something that's an invisible difference, that some people just can't tolerate that, and that's sad. But by being us proudly, we can lean in and say, actually, what is your problem?
Oh, thanks for that. So there's a question there in the chat. Let me find. I'll just scroll back up to it. From Katrin Rossiter. I teach marketing at a third level college on an entrepreneurship course. I find I'm more and more aware of neurodiverse students. Many of these students seem to lack confidence and self-esteem. Can you offer any advice to help them believe in themselves more and their strengths?
I think, as with everything, it's about having positive experiences. I think you build your resilience, actually, both through good and bad experiences. Because once you have survived a bad experience, you're generally stronger. And we go through a lot of those, but not all of us survive, right? So the believing in the strengths that they have, because often we don't even know ourselves what strengths we actually have. It's just like you think, oh, everybody can do that. So I have something with seeing patterns. It's like exploring where are the strengths for each of those students. What is it that you're really good at? Instead of focusing on what is it we're challenged with, but actually, what is it we're really good at? What is it where we can come out with something that other people have not come out with, and keep exploring that instead of trying to, follow the straight and narrow line that we might see other people do. There's a wide variety of things to explore in the arts, in music, in sciences, in so many different ways. I think if we allowed young people to drive themselves more along the lines of Montessori's teaching, where you let the children go towards what they're interested in, that's how you feel. You find out where's my strengths, what is it I'm really interested in, because you have to be really interested to become good at something. Because we don't become good at things without doing them. And strengths for us is that when we're really interested, so for example, I happen to be really interested in corporate governance, which some people find extremely boring, but for me, it's great. Nighttime reading, I'm enjoying it. So I managed to be asked, would I be a professor in corporate governance? And I thought, I'll do that. I did go to university, right? So that's quite extraordinary. I did a banking degree whilst I was working, but for me, that was something I would never, ever in my wildest, dreams have thought would have happened. So I think look for what you enjoy doing. And for these students, what do they enjoy doing? That is where they can be superior, because they enjoy it and they will then put their focus on it.
I have to say, just very quickly, I'm one of those people that goes to sleep when they start talking about governance. I know we have to do it, and we have to show transparency in it, but so there's a job open for you in ADHD Ireland anytime you want. But just before we offer you the job, I think Beth has the next question.
Charlotte, there's a question here from Graham in the chat, and he says he recently realized at the age of 47 that he is neurodiverse, and that he set up a neurodiversity network at his company, which is great, yeah. And he says they're making real changes to the way the firm recognizes and supports neurodiverse colleagues. He's wondering if you have any advice or strategies for getting senior buy-in.
Yes, I mean, obviously, go straight to them and say, we need an executive sponsor, and who in the executive team can do that. But maybe also look to the board members, if there are board members, that it's accessible. So on one of my boards, I'm also chairing the Inclusion Council, for example. And obviously that's really helpful, because I'm openly, new minority, and therefore people feel more at ease because I'm part of the minorities in the business. And so I think it's important to bring it to the executives in a specific in a way that they can understand and embrace. So at Iron, we've made a guide of how to set up a neurodiversity employee resource group. And some of the first points is get that executive buy-in. I think in this day and age, there will definitely be some executives that's in touch one way or the other with neurominorities or might be themselves. And that's generally the best way to come in. But if there is a network, the more it grows, the more weight you will have to also ask for that support. And it is really important to get that executive support. I talked to someone in a very large bank, and she started pushing in and setting up a group, and then in the end actually got it up to board level through sheer determination and she's in her late 20s. It was an extraordinary piece of work she did to push it into the executive level. It feels uncomfortable, but if you already have a group, that group together should maybe approach the executive management with an idea of what is it we want from them, what are the asks, and there should be no more than 2 or 3 asks, because if you give a huge list, then often it just gets put away. But some key asks as the first step, and a good letter explaining why you want that, and that you are this group of people. I hope that helps.
Okay, just to go back to questions, you brought up the Admiral Nick Vine. We know, and I've seen it on the UK website, that pilots who have you're not allowed to be a pilot if you have a diagnosis of ADHD. There is challenges in armed forces around the world having diagnosis of ADHD and autism.
Yeah.
Is there some careers people with neurodivergent conditions shouldn't have, or is that completely wrong?
I think that's completely wrong. I mean, I don't think there's any careers where we should be excluded, because we're so different. We are on exactly the same spectrum as everyone else of, intelligence, of we're high, we're tall and we're short, we have, different eye colors, whatever. We are exactly the same. And we have so many different abilities. I know neurominorities in social work. I know bakers, hairdressers, bankers, lawyers, accountants. I don't think there's like builders. I don't think there's any sector I have been in where I have met lots. Actually, once I open up and say, I'm autistic and ADHD, they go, ooh. So 2 weeks ago, I worked with a private equity firm, and we have 30 portfolio companies, and they gathered all the CEOs and CFOs, and then the board members. And every person I sat next to was declaring to me that they were new. I was like, oh my God, I really felt like sending around the survey. Could just get the percentage of like neurominority people in this room. And they were all CFOs, CEOs, and board members, just extraordinary. And actually also really, really pleasing, right? And that's good to try sometimes when you open up and then see what comes back. I mean, of the women, for example, that are my peers that are working in sort of male-oriented areas, and a lot of them has come to me and said, oh, we think our husband might be, or we think our children, whatever. And I go, so what about you? And they're like, no. But then when they self-test, they're like, oh, okay, yeah. And I think about 80% of the women coming to me with that actually qualified themselves for a diagnosis.
Well, thank you very much. There's a question in from Lucretia, and forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. She's always thinking about her 6-year-old autistic son, but I think this question applies. You could change this question for a 36-year-old son, and I think the same principles apply. Is it my right to disclose my son's need to the parents of his classmates? If I don't, he'll be excluded because he's strange. If I do, he may be excluded because others may be not really sure what to expect of him. At this stage, relationships between kids are mediated by the parents.
Yeah.
I think that could be a workforce as much as school as anything else, to be honest.
It's a really good question, and it's one that we're all not sure about, because we want our children to be included. I have 3 children, and we've got neurominorities there as well, and to work so hard with all the other mothers to get my children to be included and invited and what have you. And even then, it was just like, because for me, that was really hard work. And for parents, it is. I think we have to remember that children legally have the same privacy rights in the law as adults. So we have to be, I don't agree with putting it on social media, for example. Right? Anything about your child you put on social media will never go away. And they will be adults one day, and it will still be there. And they don't want to see how they behave as children. Like, Nobody would. I mean, we always hear this, oh, here's a mother, this is you when naked when you were 1 year old. Nobody wants that picture to go around, right? So I think we have to be just considering where are we in terms of supporting our child to be able to be respected and accepted as they are. And I think I would speak to the parents, but I wouldn't go wider than that, like write it down in social media or stuff like that. So I think there's a distinct difference in that. And just bearing in mind that, yes, your child do have rights in the law to privacy. And we should just be sensitive because they will be adults one day. I mean, I have 3 adult children that I thought I gave birth to them yesterday, right? It goes fast, and then they change, and from what we thought wouldn't be possible, they're suddenly super possible, and they are in careers and they're doing things, living independently, and I go, whoa, that's amazing. But it's like, if we survive the first 21 years, then we slowly start falling in to things in a better way, generally, but only with support and with being accepted 100% for who we are. And I think that was my luck, actually, that my family could see I was different and they were aware I was different, but we have so many different people in the family that it wasn't a problem.
Okay, and the question came in from Ali just a few minutes ago. How do we navigate disclosure when you don't present as the typical stereotype? I don't want to give my formal diagnosis report at this time as it's personal. And I think the interesting part is here. Also, as a woman, we present differently.
Yeah, and that is an issue. So I just blurt it out now, but I've been doing that for a few years. But what I get back is like, oh, you don't look autistic. And I was like, talk to me about what autistic looks like. I'm really interested in your input on that. And as they start trying to, they don't even start there back because they realize that was not a great comment. And then there are people who say, no, you're not. Also within my own family, I have people who keep insisting that I'm not. And I was like, this is really super unhelpful because I'm trying to embrace this and work with this. And actually, I've been through a significant diagnostic procedure with hundreds of questions and other people commenting, and psychologists and what have we, right? It's long, it wasn't fast. So to question that, it's just very hard to swallow. But it's something that sometimes we just have to move on from that conversation. Someone also, this one with little avatars, little old lady who was giving my son driving lessons, and I said to her, I just want to say, because he was chatting too much and it was killing him when he was trying to learn to drive. Right. I said, look, my son is autistic, he doesn't really want the small talk. And she said, oh, I'm so sorry. I was like, yeah, you don't have to be sorry, I'm just telling you this. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was like, okay, well, I'm also autistic, and oh, I'm really so sorry. And she said it 4 times, and I thought, okay, this conversation is over. Then I met her again 3 weeks later for another lesson. She comes up to me and she's like, I've been thinking about what you said. I really didn't know there was something wrong with you. And you go, yes. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just different. And that's all I wanted you to understand, that your way is not necessarily the way that we want things. And she just looked confused. And so that is the person that we would like to reach. There's quite a big middle group of people that are sort of happily unknowing or not really doing the work to understand. So they're floating around thinking about Rain Man and Sheldon and whatever, and certainly no women, right? And no minority or differences. I mean, it's crazy. It's actually crazy if you think about it, right? Because it's not as if that we're more white people. I mean, we're only 20% white people in the world's demographics. In the 80% of non-white people, there is also the same percentage of new minorities. But that's just so badly understood. So I think for the question, it's not easy, and we get a lot of people saying things that feels like an insult. That little old lady didn't mean to upset me. So I think it's the intention behind what comes back at you that you need to look at, because we're not looking to start a war or anything. We're just looking for understanding. And sometimes you just have to walk away because it becomes too difficult. I mean, I had to walk away from that conversation twice. And I don't know if I moved the dial with this little lady, but I'm intending to try to do it by keep putting myself out there. And people who just keep saying, no, you're not. It's just like they just need to see more people that isn't fitting their stereotype.
Oh, thanks, Dad. And I think Beth probably has our next to last question.
Yeah, we've 4 minutes left, Charlotte, and we've a few questions. I don't know if we'll fit them all in, but we'll try for a couple more anyway. So there's a question here from Faiza, and she says, if we're working in a neurodivergent majority workplace and we come across a leadership whose behavior is not understandable and not open for communication, what's the best way to overcome that communication gap?
It is going to be a difficult one because there are leaders that are just impossible to communicate with. I experience them in boardroom, the CEOs, and sometimes we have to move them on because they simply can't understand. But leaders should have the ability to communicate across neurotypes because all workplaces are neurodiverse, all classrooms are neurodiverse. You know, in the prison population are neurodiverse. We are all different neurotypes. And I think approaching them with maybe saying, look, this workforce is neurodiverse. It is highly likely that at least 20%, of this workforce comes from a different neurotype to yours. So, or maybe they are themselves at different neurotypes, and therefore communication is completely different to what other neurotypes do. But that's maybe the conversation to. So I've written a short article around inter-neurotype communication to approach this with how do we, just like we have intercultural communication, we have inter-neurotype communication. And it is shown in research that we talk past each other when we have different neurotypes. So we need to find ways where we can actually meet. And that's the conversation I would open it with. What can we do together so that I can understand what you say and you can understand what I say, and we receive each other's messages in a way that is beneficial to our workplace, and so we get the job done, right?
Okay, thanks. And we've probably about 2 minutes left. I'm not sure you'll be able to answer this question in the available time. You were talking this evening about corporate leadership and disclosure, but we're talking about and how that fits into the neurodiversity agenda. Very short question, but I think a slightly longer answer. What do we need to do to change society to make it equal for people that are neurodivergent?
I'll try to do this really quickly. Well, we need to come together, basically. We need to come together in the many numbers, because then we can't be ignored. We can be divided and conquered. But when we come together, it's very difficult to ignore what we say. Then we need to create community resources that we can share about who we are and what we are. So we have Mythbusters going on right now, for example, where we encourage us to write, this is a myth because this is actually real life for us. Share our stories and push it out. So if we have, for example, 1 million people come together within the Institute of Neurodiversity and we put something together, all of us, we give input to some resources, and then 1 million members share that in their wider network, then you would have hit 10 million people in one go. That's how I think we spread it out to the broader and change slowly the culture of how people look at us and what they expect that we are. We change it through lifting our voices together.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that. Yep, we'll hand you back to Beth.
Thanks, Charlotte. That was really great. And there's so many brilliant questions that we didn't get time for that I would love to hear your answers to. So I'm sorry we didn't get to those questions, and maybe we'll have you back another time.
Maybe we'll come back and just do Q&As.
yeah, that would be great. Yeah. We could easily fill the hour, I think. Yeah, that would be great. So thanks so much, Charlotte, and thanks to Ken and to Valerie. And thank you to all of you for joining us this evening. The next session is the 4th Thursday in October, and the date of which escapes me at the moment, but that's when it is. And we will have Professor Jackie Rogers, who is from the University of Newcastle in the UK, and she's going to be talking to us about anxiety and ADHD. And you can sign up for that in the usual way through Eventbrite. And we hope that you do so, and we see you then. So thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.